hidden in plain sight, the verse Satan fears most. Tucked away in the heart of Scripture lies a verse so powerful, so unerringly direct, that when spoken aloud, it echoes through the spiritual realm like thunder. It's not encrypted in mystery or locked away in some obscure apocalyptic scroll. No, this verse has been right before our eyes, printed in nearly every Bible, recited by pastors, memorized by believers, but rarely grasped in its full, terrifying truth. And the forces of evil would rather you never realize what it really means. Today, we're going beyond the surface. We're diving headfirst into a verse that doesn't merely mention the enemy. It unveils his tactics, his structure, and more importantly, how you can stand against him. That verse, Ephesians 6 verse 12. It's more than instruction, it's a spiritual revelation. And if you're ready to look beyond the veil, strap in. This journey will change how you see the world and the war raging within it. The verse that reveals the unseen. Let's begin by reading it. The New International Version translates Ephesians 6 verse 12 as follows. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. At first glance, this may sound like standard biblical encouragement, a reminder that the Christian life involves spiritual resistance. But to stop here would be to miss the deeper implications. Many sermons mention this verse as part of the armor of God passage, focusing on standing strong in the faith. But few explore what Paul was actually saying about the enemy, and why that enemy is far more organized, ancient, and dangerous than we've been led to believe. Understanding the context, a spiritual epicenter, Paul's letter to the Ephesians was likely penned between 60 to 62 AD, during his imprisonment in Rome. But Ephesus wasn't just another Roman city. It was a place bursting with spiritual activity. The Temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, stood there, attracting pilgrims, occultists, and philosophers alike. The city was a hotbed for magical practices, religious syncretism, and the worship of various deities. Acts 19 tells us that when people converted to Christianity in Ephesus, they burned their magic scrolls, called Ephesia Grammata, which were so valuable they represented a fortune. This wasn't symbolic. It was warfare. The people Paul addressed knew about the supernatural not as theory, but as lived experience. They had seen the dark side of spiritual power up close. Echoes from the ancient world. Zooming out further, we discover that Ephesians 6 verse 12 is not an isolated statement. It resonates with a much older narrative, the worldview of the ancient Near East. In Mesopotamian texts, such as the Enuma Elish, we find stories of divine beings at war with monsters of chaos. Canaanite lore describes Baal doing battle with Mot, the god of death. These myths were more than fiction. They reflected humanity's understanding of a world governed by both seen and unseen forces. Some scholars, like Dr. Michael Heiser, suggest that Paul's mention of rulers and authorities mirrors these ancient ideas, not to validate pagan myth, but to reframe the narrative through a biblical lens. This is not just poetic language. According to Heiser and others, Paul was referring to real, spiritual entities, fallen powers, who have rebelled against God and continue to wield influence over the physical world. The divine rebellion. To fully appreciate Ephesians 6 verse 12, we must revisit Genesis 6 verses 1 to 4, where the sons of God descend to earth, take human wives, and produce the Nephilim. This passage hints at an ancient rebellion in the heavenly realm, a theme expanded in Psalm 82, where God holds judgment over divine beings who failed in their responsibilities. Paul's words in Ephesians are part of this larger tradition. He's not creating something new. He's unveiling a reality long known in Jewish theology, that there exists a hierarchy of spiritual beings, some loyal to God, others in rebellion. The Dead Sea Scrolls also support this worldview. In texts like the War Scroll, phrases such as the spirits of wickedness and the prince of darkness sound remarkably similar to Paul's terminology. Even the Book of Enoch, an extra-biblical text quoted in the New Testament by Jude, describes fallen angels who corrupt humanity and rule over regions of the earth until judgment. Whether Paul directly referenced these sources or simply drew from shared cultural understanding, the point remains, He was writing with a knowledge of cosmic warfare that extends far beyond metaphor. Decoding the Greek, a layered hierarchy. Let's take a closer look at the original Greek of Ephesians 6 verse 12. Arches, rulers, a term often used to refer to principalities or foundational powers. Exousias, authorities, spiritual authorities, often with governmental overtones. Cosmocratoras, powers of this dark world, literally world rulers, a term rarely used, suggesting entities of significant influence. Pneumatica tes ponerias, en tois epuraniwa, spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. These aren't sweet angelic beings floating on clouds. Heavenly realms refers to the unseen dimension where spiritual battles occur. Paul is stacking terms deliberately. He's not saying there's one enemy. He's saying there's an entire system, a spiritual network, a dark, organized realm opposed to God's kingdom. Not a scattered collection of misfits, but a legion, a supernatural regime. Biblical parallels. This isn't the only place in Scripture where such beings appear. Consider Colossians 2 verse 15. And having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. Daniel 10 verse 13. The angel Gabriel says he was delayed by the prince of Persia, a spiritual entity, until Michael the archangel came to help him. These passages reveal not isolated ideas, but a consistent theme. Spiritual forces exert real influence over regions, people, and events. The Bible doesn't shy away from portraying these forces as actual beings, not just abstract concepts. Why this verse is so dangerous? So, why does Satan hate this verse? Because it unmasks his operation. It reminds us that our enemy isn't our boss, our ex, our neighbor, or even corrupt politicians. Ephesians 6 verse 12 redirects our attention to the real battlefield, the spiritual one. It calls believers out of a victim mindset and places them in the position of a soldier, armed with the truth. Theologically, it declares that Jesus already won, Colossians 2 verse 15, but the battle for territory, hearts, and minds continues, and you are called to participate. Spiritually, it equips you with discernment. Practically, it reshapes your priorities. Prayer is no longer a ritual. It becomes warfare. Faith becomes your shield. The Word becomes your sword. Common misunderstandings. Many modern Christians misunderstand spiritual warfare. Some see it as purely sensational. Exorcisms, shouting, casting out demons. Others dismiss it entirely, relegating evil to metaphor or systemic injustice. But Paul presents a balanced perspective. He calls believers to stand firm, not to panic or become obsessed, but to remain grounded, vigilant, and spiritually aware. Why this matters now more than ever. In a culture obsessed with visibility, money, fame, influence, we're trained to fight the wrong battles. But Ephesians 6 verse 12 pulls the curtain back and says, the real fight isn't in the polls, the boardroom, or the headlines. It's in the spiritual dimension. The enemy is unseen, but his influence is everywhere. This verse is your call to wake up. The takeaway. Ephesians 6 verse 12 is not just a memory verse. It's a battle cry, a declaration of war against an ancient evil. It reminds us that we're not just spectators. We are participants in a cosmic conflict, one in which the outcome is already secured through Christ, but the battles are still raging. So next time you read it, don't gloss over it. Feel it. Let it challenge you. Let it empower you. You're not just a believer, you're a warrior. And the kingdom of darkness is counting on you staying asleep. But now you're awake. If this revelation opened your eyes, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to see beyond the veil. We're just getting started. Let's continue uncovering the mysteries hidden in Scripture together. See you in the next one.